guys don't have to be nice, it's okay. Thank you, Frank, and thank you to everyone. Thanks for the warm introduction and for the opportunity to be here with some of the city's financial minds. I want to point out I am a product of the Chicago Public Schools. I did go to Whitney Young. Carla would be mad at me if I didn't also say I'm a graduate of Washington University in St. Louis and Harvard Business School, where I met my wife. So you can tell who has the brains in the family. One of us still works for profit, and one of us that makes, actually more money than I do now. My name's Kurt Summers, and since December 1st of 2014, I've served as your city treasurer. I know that most people don't actually know what a city treasurer does, so I'm going to start there, if that's okay. First, I'm not responsible for taxes. So, yeah, there you go. I don't like them any more than anyone else here. I'm not responsible for that. And I'm also not responsible for the city's budget. So this is an interesting thing. You guys will understand this as the best financial minds. We have a CFO who manages largely the debt financing, the bond underwriting. We have a controller who manages the day-to-day flow of funds and operating funds. We have a budget director who sets the budget, and then we have a treasurer who actually invests the assets. So that's really straightforward, right? That's and none of us report to one another. So it's a fun challenge every day. But I view my role as having three specific components. I'm the city's banker, I'm the city's investor, and the city's financial advocate, supporting the not only the fiscal health of our city, but the economic growth and opportunity of our city. From the outset, I wanted to address an elephant in the room as we are in budget season, which is that it's no secret that Chicago has had its fiscal challenges. And many of the ways that we have addressed those fiscal challenges is by asking for more and asking for more revenue without much certainty. I know certainly when I was still in the private sector, my question was, where is it going and how and when is it going to stop? And how and when will we have certainty? Because it's not an insignificant thing to be able to do capital planning and tax planning into the future, and these things have real impact on business owners and those who we want to attract to invest in our city. There's no debate about the need for Chicago to continue to get its fiscal house in order, and the question is really how. Because it's one thing to talk about the problem, but quite another to find viable solutions. That's why since day one, I've sought to use this platform as city treasurer to make a positive impact on our city's fiscal situation, guided by three core principles: efficiency, accountability, and transparency. Let me be clear, that hasn't always been easy. As I gave you four functions, there are about a dozen others that have to work together to try and make that happen. And when I took office, we were years behind the curve of modernization. I like to tell the story that I inherited a technology system that managed and processed thousands and thousands of trades a year, and this system was older than I am. And I'm proud to announce that we're now transitioning off of that system, which makes us better and more sophisticated at the work that we do, and helps us remain steadfast to this commitment. One of the ways that we've increased efficiency is by implementing a new range of cash management and investment strategies to generate higher returns and cut costs. When I first came into office, we identified that $3 billion of the city's portfolio, which is now $8 billion, by the way, we got to update the intro. We manage about $8 billion now. But when I first came in, we identified that $3 billion of this was sitting in an operating portfolio that was basically static. We went to, having not come from government, I sort of said, well, this doesn't make sense, but maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe this is what big cities do. So we went to the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, and we said, what's the best practice here? What are the standards? And they said, well, for a large city, the standard is to have at least 45 days of cash on hand. And in our portfolio, we had 4.5 months of cash, effectively money sitting in the mattress, about $2 billion more than we needed to, which meant $2 billion that was not working for us, that wasn't generating return, wasn't working for the taxpayers, business owners, and residents of our city. And in doing so, we were losing out and leaving money on the table. So we invested previously uninvested cash on hand, and we used those funds to create a more diversified mix of holdings, including agencies, municipal bonds, corporates, and other instruments. As you all know, diversification is key to managing any investment portfolio, especially when it involves public dollars. When I took office, we had 2/3 to 3/4 of our investment portfolio invested in one single security type. I wouldn't call that diversified by any stretch. And so what that meant was we were overexposed and at risk. Now we have it's set up such that no asset class represents more than 30% of our portfolio, providing more security and a better risk-adjusted return. Importantly, these steps have helped our office significantly increase investment returns. Last fiscal year alone, we generated $125 million in investment income, compared with just under $50 million per year before I took office. This year, all of us know better than to predict the markets, and we haven't finished the fourth quarter, but I can say, based on realized revenues to date, that we're going to have another strong year exceeding well over $100 million. What this means for you is that this is now a portfolio that in a short period of time has been enhanced to generate $50 to $75 million more revenue per year for the city of Chicago. Read $50 to $75 million less that we have to ask for in the form of tax revenues. Again, I don't control tax revenues, but the better job I do, the less other folks have to ask for. This to me seemed to be pretty straightforward, but that's not where the challenge ended. We're also leveraging these innovative strategies to earn higher returns for other public entities. We've taken over management of the city's enterprise funds, which support the operation, maintenance, and capital costs of the city's water and sewer systems, as well as O'Hare and Midway. We're earning higher returns on the management of these funds, and we're avoiding fees by doing it in-house. With both of these things are saving taxpayer dollars. And we're working with our pension funds to help them generate savings. So in the introduction, you heard that I sit on all the local pension boards, which is, believe it or not, an exciting and fun challenge for me. Not always fun when you have to make tough decisions and you have to deny benefits and do things that are difficult, but fun because of the importance, not just to public employee retirees and to workers, but to everyone in this room. We often forget that it's our tax dollars that are being invested alongside the employee contributions. All of us have a vested interest in these systems working. And when I came in, one of the things that I looked at in the area of Cook County, we have 11 different local pension funds. And collectively, they spend over $150 million in asset management fees. When we looked at this, we said, well, let's see if there's any opportunity there, because it's a lot of money, obviously. And it turns out that 78% of the investments were made with common firms and common funds and common investment strategies. You can imagine that one would naturally think, well, we're all paying the same price for those things, right? We're all the city of Chicago, we're all backed by the same taxpayers. Not at all. 11 separate funds, 11 different fee agreements, 11 different prices that we were paying, and in no case were we getting the economies of scale. In no case were we able to aggregate and say, hey, we're one city or one region. What's the aggregate price or cost of our total AUM in this same strategy? By the way, we all have different staffs and different consultants, and that's a fun piece we're still going to get to. But what we were able to do was say, of this north of $150 million, if we were just to get the asset management community to treat us as one entity, if we were to get common fee structures and arrangements across all the funds, it would save $25 to $50 million a year without spending a dime. By the way, the $75 million of additional revenue we generated in the portfolio last year was while we reduced costs in our office. These are the kinds of things that we can do. It doesn't always, it's not always the case that the sort of age-old condition that you have to spend money to make money. We were able to spend less and make more. And in this case, the pension funds, which I will say, you can imagine these 11 different fiefdoms, if you will, didn't take so kind to, the new kid on the block coming in and saying, hey, you guys should think about doing this. In fact, the response that I got was, we had heard that idea once before, or twice, but the first time we heard that was a treasurer named Cecil Partee, who made that proposal the year I was born. There was an old memo that I found where he made this proposal, I think to then Mayor Byrne, suggesting that this happened, and he was told not in your lifetime, and in fact it didn't happen in his lifetime. Fortunately, it's happening in all of ours. And yeah, things in government are often hard, and you have a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different constituent groups. In this case, you have dozens and dozens of unions and different organizations. But the thing about it is when you present this level of financial impact to those folks, it becomes undeniable, because it quickly becomes a question. Would you like me to tell your members, or would you like to? That you'd rather than change, you'd rather continue to give Wall Street $50 million more a year than what they have earned. That's an easy conversation. It makes for decades and decades of this structure that is protected. Quickly becomes an easier conversation, because ultimately everyone has someone that they're responsible to. And when you have this size and magnitude of impact, and you can make it sort of that plain, and frankly we offer to do all of the work and make it easy for them, that really changed the conversation. To this day, we're continuing to innovate in the City Treasurer's Office. This year alone, we've negotiated better interest rates from our banks that hold city funds. Our most recent deposits are now earning nearly twice what they were in the years preceding our tenure here. And we've drastically reduced our use of instantaneous wire transfers. You guys will probably laugh at this, but we traditionally would have wire transfers, sometimes not once, not twice, but even 3 times between intra-city funds, and be charged on every single one of those. And we process thousands and thousands and thousands of transactions a year. And you can imagine that we were, it's like the old cartoon when you have like the hungry dog sees a turkey leg on a plate or something, Thanksgiving dinner. That's what we look like to the banks. We're more than happy to charge us fees to transfer money to ourselves. We've now eliminated that process, relying obviously more on ACH and on a more streamlined system that has reduced costs of moving city funds by a factor of 15 times. This is the kind of low-hanging fruit that folks in this room, like me, in entering public service would see, shake their head, and then get about the business of fixing. The second thing that we've done is implemented new benchmarks to ensure that we're holding ourselves accountable to constituents at a higher standard, just like any other investment fund. I mean, I view that what our shop at City Hall, we have what used to be a sleepy little investment office on the first floor, as really building a more sophisticated investment platform where we have a proactive strategy in the markets and where we're efficient in working with our nearly 40 broker-dealers and investing money on behalf of the people in this room every day. Before I came into office, the city's treasurer's office had used 90-day T-bills as its official benchmark in reporting for the investment portfolio. This is a portfolio that had a duration of 1.5 to 2 years. 90-day T-bills, 1.5 to 2 years. Government-backed corporates, munis, credit rating of AA or single A in many cases. That benchmark was a false premise for us to be a false standard for us. And while it was something that drew shock and ire from colleagues who were also politicians, I am an elected official, who would say, why would you make yourself more accountable? Why would you raise the standard for which people view you? It's more appropriate and more realistic, and it communicates the standard that you guys should all hold us by. And so as a result, we created custom benchmarks that are better suited for our portfolio. And I should note that we performed this modernization and these returns while also changing the municipal code, going through the city council process, changing the municipal code to create a minimum credit quality standard of AA for our portfolio for the first time in the city's history. In the past, as you might imagine, as the fiscal health of the city gets challenged, our bonds become pricier, right? The cost of doing business goes up, our interest cost goes up, our rates go up. Left to one's own devices, the person that's managing that portfolio would have the incentive to eliminate the amount of negative arbitrage that's there, right? Go seek yield because it's costing us so much more. You can't do that with public dollars. You can't be beholden to the market impact of some other poor fiscal decisions and cause you to take more risk with the people's capital. And so we changed the municipal code so that no matter who's sitting in that chair, years after Cecil Partee, we actually will have a standard in place that says you have to maintain a minimum credit quality for the people of Chicago. The third thing that we've done is that we've implemented new initiatives to ensure that we are as transparent with taxpayers as any investment fund is with its shareholders. When I first came into office, I visited Chicago's 77 neighborhoods in 77 days, which was tough, and on day 78, I took a nap. But the constant refrain that I heard was the need for transparency with respect to our investments. When I talked to credit rating agencies, when I talked to our bondholders, we were very much viewed as a black box, and dare I say that was done on purpose here in the city of Chicago. So that's why we implemented our quarterly earnings calls, which were the first municipality in the nation to institute a quarterly earnings call. And the analysis there was simple. We run a $7 billion enterprise, now $8 billion portfolio. The mayor just introduced a $10 billion budget. Any other institution of that size that had public stakeholders would have to have regular public accountability. And all of us know that, especially in the public company space, as quarterly reporting and having quarterly earnings calls. So we were the first city in the nation to institute this, and we now have 10 quarters in, hundreds and hundreds of folks who dial in every quarter to learn more about the city's financial picture and fiscal health and the local economy. And it's everyone from folks in this room who are residents and taxpayers and may have a passing interest, to our bondholders and credit ratings agencies and others that have a vested financial interest as well. By ushering in a new era of efficiency, accountability, and transparency into this office, we've made a dent on the fiscal issues facing our city, and in doing so, we've created a better business climate here in Chicago. As you can tell, I take my fiduciary responsibility very seriously, and believe it or not, I'm having fun doing this stuff. But I also take very seriously my mission to help drive and grow our local economy, which in turn also improves our city's fiscal health. When I first took office, I learned that we had a mandate to invest everywhere in the world. We literally, between our pension funds and our treasury portfolio, we have firm mandates to invest in South America, to invest in the Middle East, to invest in Western and Eastern Europe, South Asia, East Asia. We have mandates to invest, believe it or not, in every part of the world except for the third largest market and the largest economy in the world, which happens to be our own backyard. And I thought to myself, two questions actually. One, I wonder what we've missed out on here in Chicago by having no mandate to invest here, and in fact, an aversion to investing in our own backyard. And why has this been the case for decades? The answer became clear as soon as I started to ask this question. And it was a bias. It was an agency problem. See, if you're on one of these staffs and you're a portfolio manager or you're a financial analyst and you make a proposal to invest in a company that's in a third world country that by virtue of a coup or dictatorship goes under new control, there's a state-owned enterprise now that puts your company out of business, it never makes the front page of the Tribune. If you invest in the South Loop or in Bronzeville where I grew up or in Wicker Park, and the attorney on the real estate deal is the cousin, nephew, brother, sister, father of an alderman, it's front page news, whether it makes money or not. And certainly if you invest locally and that investment loses money, you could lose your job. So this is the dynamic that's held us back and kept us from investing in our own city, because there's a natural and understandable risk aversion because of the public nature of this role and because it's in your own backyard. But what's the cost of that bias been? And it is a bias. And it's a bias in belief that it's safer, better, easier for us to do this far away than in our own backyard. The cost of that bias has been tremendous to everyone in this room. Everyone who seeks to make the very best investments, no matter where they are, and trust that those who are entrusted with the fiduciary responsibility to you are going to do the same. The other thing that I thought was interesting about this process is, all of you are senior financial executives representing private companies. Any other institution, no matter what the size, but certainly large institutions, you make investments from your balance sheet to support your income statement. You invest in M&A, in R&D, in PP&E, all things that you believe will ultimately drive revenue or improve your bottom line. See, institutions like yours do that naturally, and it's part of your mission to drive shareholder value. Cities don't do that. Municipalities don't do that. Chicago certainly didn't do that until now. I had seen this pattern before when I worked at Grosvenor Capital, and I led the emerging manager business, which also invests in women-owned funds, new seed funds, and minority-owned funds. And I'd seen empirical studies that showed, these are all hedge funds, but I'd seen empirical studies that showed time and time again the outperformance of these newer funds and these diverse funds that had a different talent pool, different pipeline for ideas, and a still persistent lack of capital going there. And it was largely because of bias, and largely because of not race or gender bias, but bias against being the first one, biased against being wrong and doing something that was not traditional, easy, that you'd be okay if they were in the second or third quartile of performance, right around the median, fine, don't need to take the perceived risk of something new. And what I saw in that process was Grosvenor as an entity which had $50 billion under management, was leaving money on the table for our clients. It's the same thing that's been happening here in Chicago. We see non-market bias driving investment decisions in our neighborhoods every day, especially in our struggling neighborhoods, which are predominantly filled with Black and brown residents. These neighborhoods are starved for capital, and that leaves, in my opinion, both money and opportunities on the table for all of us. Often traditional financial institutions believe it's too risky to lend in a neighborhood that hasn't proven its growth or has struggled from disinvestment for decades. Neighborhoods like Bronzeville, the one I grew up in. I want to be clear that this disinvestment has not only led to inequality and some of the social concerns like community instability and ultimately violence, but it's led to missed opportunities for us to achieve the best returns possible in our portfolio for everyone in this room. The data that underscores it, the data that we see every day underscores this bias. And we see a lack of access to capital with neighborhood businesses and in areas that are not proven. So here's what we're doing about it. Last month I announced a $20 million deposit into Illinois Service Federal, which is a community bank here in Chicago that was founded in 1934 and happens to be the last remaining Black-owned bank in the city of Chicago. Now this is, the home of LaSalle Street, the place where we have more banks than any other state in the United States, any other state in the Union. And for a population and for a community that represents about 1 million people, there's one bank left standing. And some of that is outside of their control and outside of the control of everybody in this room. But very clear that when we made that $20 million deposit, which on the basis of $8 billion that we manage is a rounding error, it was the largest deposit in their history. And the overwhelming support from the community that they are in was resounding. And the reason for this is really simple. Who knows a local community better than the community banker? These are your neighbors, these are your fellow parishioners, that's the restaurant that you go to, the local bed and breakfast is the one you send your relatives to. The community bankers, unlike large financial institutions, don't view loan applications as a name and social security number in black and white as a piece of paper. That's Bob that I go to church with, Sally, whose restaurant I go to. This is their grandmother's home down the street, and I know she pays every month. It is a person and not a sheet of paper. That's the kind of intentionality that I think we have to have with our balance sheet. More importantly, another larger step in innovation that is really pushing the envelope, we're creating the new Chicago Community Catalyst Fund, which is a $100 million local investment fund. It's a commitment that will channel sustainable public and private investment into capital into these neighborhoods across Chicago. We're going to find these opportunities that we have dismissed for several decades, and with a belief that our capital and other private capital alongside us will find the opportunities that make Chicago great and will attract capital around the rest of the world. This vehicle is the first of its kind investment at the city level. We've seen it in states around the country perform very successfully, but we know that infusing capital in these neighborhoods addresses an issue of systemic bias and perceived risk that will no longer leave money on the table for us. We need to make certain that all of Chicago's neighborhoods have the investment and access to capital that they need to prosper and grow. And that's not just good for our communities, but it's good for our entire economy. It's leveraging our balance sheet to make investments where they're needed most to support our income statement, or lack thereof, I should say. There's a great story about the tremendous growth in the Loop and the surrounding areas. We'd like to replicate that throughout this city. That's why the next step is investing not only in the Central Business District, but also in our neighborhoods. We need to be innovators to solve today's largest challenges, whether modernizing government offices or finding profitable investment opportunities in our neighborhoods. And as we undertake these challenges and implement new initiatives, we will continue to look to you and to the rest of the business community for your ideas, insights, and your help, your partnership. Trust me, we need it. We all need to be a part of creating a brighter future for Chicago's businesses and for Chicago's residents. There's a reason why Chicago leads the country for 5 straight years in foreign direct investment. There's a reason why Chicago is perennially voted one of the best places to live and work. There's a reason why Chicago has the history it does of a city of big shoulders. And there's a reason why we have this sense of civic pride that we can do more, do better, and be greater as a community. It's because of that reason that I do this job, because I know that every one of our 2.7 million residents deserve that same opportunity, and if we can all work together, and we need to all work together, we can provide it to them. Thank you.